Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be here today on the InsurTech Leadership Podcast with Trace Meek. He's a third generation agency owner turned tech innovator and the CEO of Ask Fetch. After years of battling endless PDFs, Excel files, and underwriting emails, Trace built LEAI, a conversational assistant that can answer carrier underwriting questions in seconds. Welcome, Chase. Oh, Jesus, I screwed that up. Sorry, Trace.
No worries. No problem, Josh. Appreciate it. Thank you
Hey,
so much for having me on.
here,
Was
let
that?
me just start from the top. I'll just
Sure.
start from the top. We'll edit that out. Sorry about that. All right, fantastic. Well, excited today on the InsurTech Leadership Podcast to have Trace Meek, a third generation agency owner turned tech innovator and CEO of Ask Fetch. After years of battling endless PDFs, Excel files, and underwriting emails, Trace built LEAI, a conversational assistant that can answer carrier underwriting questions in seconds. Thanks so much for joining today, Trace. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So maybe you can, just tell us a bit about your background and kind of how that led to the creation of AskFetch.
Sure. I've been a third generation insurance agency owner. My grandfather started our agency back in 1954. My father took it over, and I took it over about 15 years ago. And it's all those pain points in your office that you're not really paying attention to, but you hear them. And one of them was that constant, who will ride a 12-year-old roof with a pit bull, trampoline, age of home, location, all those sort of things over and over and over again. And it just, I felt that was just what the agency does. So, that's how it worked. And about 6 years ago, I broke my left foot, my fifth metatarsal. I rolled it. And I was laying on the couch with some time to think because I couldn't really do much. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to handle all that uh, questions that are going back and forth in the office, because it is disruptive when one person asks the office, then everyone stops what they're doing. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So, the standard way, and a lot of agents out there probably agree with me, is they got that 3-ring binder, right? The 3-ring binder with all the underwriting pamphlets, and trying to keep up with that's a pain. And then they probably tried an Excel spreadsheet, which is what I did. I tried to put it into this data, but it's so complicated. So sitting there on the couch, I picked up the phone and I called a buddy of mine who is a coder, and I said, hey, can we build a filtered system that's simple? And he says, how hard could insurance underwriting be? Right. So he gets into the industry, and we ended up going through, 50 different carriers, underwriting criteria, looking at it, trying to find what the constants were across. And we built an actual filter system. This is back in 2019, right? You would select the roof type, you select the roof age, and then it would populate out all the carriers that would write the risk. And I turned to him and I said, is there a way we could just like Google this, right? Just a little bar where we can ask it a question. And he said, Trace, there's really nothing like that. This is 2019 without spending tens of millions of dollars and trying to build it out. And I said, okay. So we went along, and we've started onto this road. And then people were like, how do we underwrite? That's awesome. We can figure out who the carriers are, but then how do we go to the quote? So then we added the quoting process. So that's what's been kind of evolving over the past first 4 or 5 years. And then all this AI came on board, right? With these large language models and things. And I have the largest database of underwriting information. So we were able to take that whole thing, put it into a large language model, and create who is now LEAI. So now you can go in there, ask her the question, and she can spit out all the different carriers and what they'll write the risk. So kind of a long
Got it.
story to get there, but that's kind of how it came about.
And so how has it evolved as you've been able to, access the power of an LLM and some of the newer technologies? What's different now today versus when you started?
So when we started, we had to build probably like an inclusion system or a filter system where you actually have to manually select the products.
Yeah.
Like you had to choose trampoline, you had to choose solar panel. Now you just go to this AI, you choose the state you're in and the carriers that you're appointed with that you want to ask Ellie a question, and then you just type who will write a solar paneled roof in Pinellas County built in 1954 for $400,000, and then she'll spit out all the different carriers from that database that we pretty much have been building over the past 6 years.
And so it's really no different than the way you described in a sense, but it's a chat GPT focused on this particular data set, which I assume you're constantly trying to update as underwriters, carriers roll out new products or make adjustments to coverages or geographies that they're covering, et cetera.
Well, and that's the great part about our product too, is that we are constantly going into the carrier sites. We have a lot of relationships with the carriers. They send us the data when it updates. We update the large language model pretty much daily. We're always adding information and updating it. The difference between, if you look at just ChatGPT, for example, versus kind of what we've built, is if you say, I was born in 1979, that data will never change to the future. I'll always be born in 1979. But with underwriting data, they could say they could take a home 1979 or newer, but next week it could be 1950 or newer, right? So you have to be able to go back in and almost alter the information that the large language model knows. And so that's where our kind of special sauce is being able to know how to replace that, how to refresh it on the fly. And that way, when the agent asks the question the next time, the answer's there from Ellie.
So what's the sort of balance between just, having an API feed that pushes in updates versus sort of that special expertise or human knowledge that you're leveraging to make sure it can be, most useful to your customers?
When you're talking about the API, you mean from the carriers?
APIs? Yeah, exactly.
The different, and that's where the technology world is just sort of kind of messed up, right? And so these carriers have these quoting platforms, but they don't have underwriting built into them, right? So that's why they have these QRGs to send you, because you agent can quote it, because the rating factors, like a trampoline's not a rating factor, right? It's a yes or no to writing the policy. So what happens is those APIs doesn't have that data. That's why it has to be done in kind of a manual sense to be able to grab that data, unstructured, as you know. If, each carrier can have a different QRG and a different placement of where all that data is. We have a team of people who scrape that data, look for it, and populate into the system for Ellie. And we were kind of one of the first, I wouldn't say one of the first companies, but you've heard a lot of the agentic AIs, like the little agents. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, because each carrier has like a representative that goes and pulls that data back kind of to the mothership, Ellie, and then Ellie then takes that and then populates it. So she's not going into each one. She sends out little minions. I don't know what you want to call them, little agents.
Yeah. And so how does someone access Ellie? I mean, are you selling this directly and it's its own sort of window that sits on their desktop through a browser or something, or is it embedded somewhere else, or how are people accessing this?
So it's all web-based. We've been very strong. Fetch was built with the idea to help the agents create an amazing experience for the consumer by us keeping the insurance piece simple, if that's understanding. Because at the end of the day, the consumer's the one who's sitting there waiting to get that information, right? They want to get the quote. The average agent takes 24 to 48 hours to turn around a quote. And some of it is because they have to hunt and peck for all this data. So yes, we're a web-based system. You would just log on to askfetch.com. Most of the country, we're rolling out next month. Many of the states, it'll be $25 a user per month. No annual contracts or anything, just keeping it inexpensive. And because I was an agent, I know what that's like. I know what, you sign up for these 3-year contracts and then you never use the system. So we want people to be able to come and go as they please. And it's mobile friendly. So we wanted to make it to where the agent could log in and ask Ellie a question right from your phone.
And are you mostly focused on independent agencies, or who's your target customer base?
We can help. pretty much anybody, but yes, we've been more of in the independent world. Our agency's in Florida, and as you know, Florida, we have like 30 or 40 homeowner carriers. So it was the best place to start with our product because we were able to have a large amount of carriers and information to really kind of focus on how to do this in other states.
Got it. And um, what is the transition like for you personally, going from a third generation agency, and what it takes to operate that type of business, and then building a tech business from scratch? What's that experience been like for you?
I've learned a lot of new things, that's for sure. A lot of pain points. But there's one thing I would have to say is the constant between the two. That is that the consumer. So for me, it's the agent with AskFetch. Before that, it was the insured, right? Those are very important people to me, and I listen to them. I accept their feedback. I get very granular with a lot of them. If somebody emailed me, I will respond. That's where I really find that sometimes a lot of these insurance tech or just products for insurance, they kind of all hide, right? And they don't really want to listen. They're just kind of telling you what this is, and this is how they build it. And then I also really want to listen to the consumers' pain points. What's the real issue here that I can help even tweak even better? And so, Ellie, originally you had to ask each carrier a question. You had to go to like Frontline, Allstate, and
Yep.
ask each question. And they said, well, can we ask like a group of them? So that's where Ellie 2.0 evolved, right? Now you can select multiple carriers and ask the question to all of them. So, that's the one part that's always been, to me, that's been really fun. It's the fact that it's changing people's um, experience in the insurance industry. How do I, if someone new comes into the industry, they don't really
Yeah.
have to understand the underwriting like they used to. Now they can just ask the question and it works really well. And it makes me happy when agents that have been doing it for 20 years go, Trace, do you know how many hours a week you're saving me, or hours a
Yeah.
day you're saving me now than having to do this? Then pick up the phone and call the underwriter, pick up the.
So are you primarily selling to the agency principals, and if they're big enough, say, an operations manager, or are you kind of getting interest from individual producers, and then maybe that bubbles up into a broader agency relationship?
Usually it's the agency owner reaches out to us and says, hey, I have a group of producers or CSRs that would like have access to the product. That's usually where I'm at. But I have some companies that are huge. I have one that has 100 users, right? And so they've usually it's the owner or some sort of operations person that reaches out to me.
Yeah. And as you started to get the product in the hands of other people, was there any surprising feedback, or have there been any particular product features that you've incorporated based on that early feedback?
I think the feedback was like I had said earlier, like it was more about going and asking each carrier, and then let's
Yep.
now move it into there. I think that's been the most exciting is that the agent gives feedback, we listen, we create it, we send it back to them, and then they're excited. They're even more excited to use the system.
Yeah. Um, so just going back to maybe what I asked a little bit before,
Mhm.
but um, is there a particular lesson learned from the agency side that you brought to how you wanted to build this business, or do you have any kind of leadership or operating sort of philosophies in general that you bring to the way you approach business, whether it's the traditional agency side or the new company?
When I came into the insurance industry about 15, 20 years ago, I mean, it was, I mean, we were a paper filed office, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned like hard knocks, right? how do we get agents asking each other, do you have the Smith file on your desk, right? To pulling it up on their screen to then processing. And there's a lot of people who are scratch agencies that are starting now. Start with some simple tech, right? And that's what I've learned, is that there's a lot of heavy tech stack these days where people are just they're not looking for the pain point first. They're seeing the tech and then they're trying to fit it in.
Yep.
And I think that's what I've learned from the agency side and building Fetch, is that you have to find the pain point first, then let's try to fix it with the tech. And there was actually a study done like in the 1970s called the garbage can theory.
Yeah.
Did you hear this? Where everything's in the garbage, right? And they're just like clicking through and just pulling out like, oh, we have this shiny object. Let's try to implement it into our corporation. And that's why it's not working. And I think there was an article out that says 95% of the companies that are implementing AI is not working, mainly because they're not putting it in the right places, right? And there's a huge learning curve. So
Yeah.
another...
Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say that was the thing in my agency. When we implemented tech, it would be so complicated, it would take us almost a year. So that's been kind of the rollover mission to Fetch. Keep it simple. Like everything has to be simple and easy to use, so that you could go find a great person at a Starbucks, sit them in the seat, get them an insurance license, and they're on the road, right? They can start answering questions on the phone and be able to look things up easily.
And yeah, so I mean, some of the stuff, I think some of that data is interesting. I mean, I think some of these enterprise projects, to your point, they try to push things down. I think some of that data also relates to when companies try to build things on their own versus working with partners. They have a higher fail rate. But when you think about most innovation, it's typically because someone in the back office, say, gets frustrated because they're like, why am I spending so much time doing it? Or why do we do it this way? And then
Correct.
they figure out a better way to do it or how to automate it somehow, whether that's just with a macro in a spreadsheet or whether it's more sophisticated tech. And that's typically how real innovation happens, is someone's got a pain point and then it bubbles up to something more sort of industrial in strength versus trying to force something industrial onto something that doesn't exactly map to what the tech does. So I think you make a good point. That said, from your observations, if you were mentoring an agency owner who wants to modernize, besides sort of, keeping it simple, as you said, are there particular areas or particular common pain points you've seen where you'd suggest they may want to start?
It always costs more than you think it does. That's usually the standard. No, I would tell them, is it really going to solve an issue? Because you can build automation for anything. Is it really going to solve something that is going to help your team and things move forward? And does it really affect the customer, right? Does it affect the customer experience? And then if that is a yes, then it is really trying to find the right team, right? Trying to find somebody who really understands the technology piece. I was very lucky in that I have a pretty strong tech background along with my knowledge of insurance. So that came together quite well. Sometimes you'll find people that have no clue about insurance, but they're coders, right? And that can be kind of a tough part. So you kind of want to make sure that it's somebody that understands the insurance world just enough to be dangerous, so they can better give you direction when you're trying to build your product.
And what have you, speaking of teams, sort of what have you learned about hiring for a startup versus maybe hiring for traditional insurance? Or is it really, at the end of the day, pretty much the same?
I think in the insurance world, I'd been in it long enough to know the type of person that I needed in the agency, either a salesperson or a CSR, and know the questions to ask. But I was kind of blind coming into this. I was very lucky that my co-founder is a coder, and extremely talented. He's written some amazing code, and then he shrinks it down and makes it tighter, and he understands my simplicity world. So that's been really helpful. And then a lot of it for a startup, I kind of suggest outsourcing some of the things, because we have VAs that help us do some things. I outsource like a CPA, an attorney, a marketing organization, because you're kind of starting off kind of bootstrapped, and it's a little easier to pay a marketing team a price every month than it is to hire a marketing person to come in.
And how do you find it, managing part-time resources like that? Or, if someone works for you, you can pretty much tell them, this is priority 1, 2, 3. You can kind of do that in a model with consultants and VAs and things like that. But at the end of the day, they may have competing priorities outside of your
hmm
organization. So how do you manage that to kind of get the things done you need done on time?
So one of the things we did, my partner and I, is that we focused on making sure the technology on the back end was simple enough that somebody can come in and do it, but enough to where we wouldn't need a lot of people to do it, if that makes sense. You don't have to recode the back end every time. So our VA can go in and run the updates, pull the information down and push it up really as a user interface. Like, we created a simple user interface for the back just as much as we did in the front. And, when it comes to simplicity, there is a lot of complexity under there
Yeah.
that makes it simple. So,
What kind of partners or collaborators are most valuable to you now, or maybe in the future, as you roll out and look to scale LEAI?
so one of the things we did initially when we first launched AskFetch, is we reached out to our state association, which ours was the Florida Association of Independent Agents, and we asked them to help us. Because I was very involved with them already on the agency level, it was pretty easy to get in there. Um, but I still had to go through a process, and it was nice to get their stamp of approval on it, especially when you're a startup tech company, because the other agents around trust what they do. So I feel that that's really important, and that's probably something I'll end up doing more and more as we spread out into other states.
And do you have a vision for where AskFetch will be 2 years from now?
I do, and I would like to see Ellie, to be the standard for the underwriting, not just for homeowners anymore, but for all personal lines and commercial across the country. I would like her to be your junior CSR in the office, or that you can always ask the questions to and be able to get those answers, and and then eventually have her quoting.
And do you view that as kind of enabling agencies to take their existing CSR staff and just be able to do more business with that team? Or how do you sort of envision this technology impacting agencies in practice?
Yeah, I don't look at it as it's something where people are going to lose their jobs. I look at it that it's going to enhance their job, but it's probably going to save. There's probably one person in their office, if not two, that their job is to get the QRGs, put them in a folder, print them for everyone, manage the Excel spreadsheet. That brings you no dollars into your office right now, right? Take that person off of that, because they're probably a part-time CSR too, right? So they're probably doing both, or their manager, right? So take them off of that. Let us manage all that for you. Easily ask the question and get your people writing more business, and being able to create a great experience for the consumer. Because the consumer picks up the phone, and goes, "I'm getting a trampoline," or "Do I need to get a new roof?" Usually you would go, "I'll get back with you on that," and have to call underwriting. Now you can just type Ellie the question while you're on the phone, answer it right there. Everyone's happy,
Yeah.
and the consumer's happy because it's fast.
And do you have any broader thoughts on how you see AI changing the relationship between carriers and agencies over time?
I like to look at LEA AI not just helping the agent, but also the carrier level, right? Those underwriters are getting paid a good job to manage the risks. they're not there to answer the phone to answer, will you write this home in an LLC, right? These simple questions that I think that will help speed up that process between the two. The carriers won't have to hire another 100 underwriters just to answer these little one-off questions, and the agent won't have to sit on hold for 15 minutes to get the response.
Yeah.
So I think it'll actually bring them together. And then when they actually have to have that conversation, Josh, it'll be something meaningful. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I have this risk that I'm working on, XYZ. What can we do to make this
Yeah.
happen, right?
So,
And the same for the consumer, right? We can create now more of a relationship and answer questions for them and
yeah.
ask how their day is, instead of you being so overwhelmed by the underwriter information that you got to get off the phone as quick as possible so you can pick up the phone and call the underwriter.
Yeah. I guess my last question is, what's one mindset shift you'd like every agency principal who listens to this to make this year, or heading into 2026?
Don't be scared. I think sometimes they get scared of clicking the button, right? They're scared of the tech. And that's been the industry standard, right? There's been so many tech products and they have so many features that it almost is overwhelming and you can't do it. So I think try something new, automate one thing, try out Fetch, right? Ask Ellie a question. See what you can do to simplify some of the things so you don't have to be stuck in the kind of the old way of doing things.
Great. Well, Trace, anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No, I just really appreciate you guys having me on here. I'm excited to see what the InsurTech Association is going to be bringing us in the future, and um, just excited to get out there. Oh, the one thing I would like to ask is that if you're an agent out there and you try out our system and you see you have a carrier missing, you can send us the data and we can upload Ellie, or send us your marketing rep or agents or carrier information, and we'll reach out to them and try to get them into the system too. So we're always trying to evolve, but I don't have every carrier yet's phone number.
All right. Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think, really interesting stuff you're doing. And so, Trace Meek, CEO of Ask Fetch, thanks so much for sharing how AI and a little discipline can turn agency chaos into clarity. And you can check out askfetch.com or follow Trace on LinkedIn to learn more about LEAI. Thanks again, Trace, so much for being on.
Thank you again.